Money often costs too much. You might have heard this profound quote before. It forces us to reflect on the true cost of acquiring wealth. Ralph Waldo Emerson wrote these words in 1860 in a collection of essays called The Conduct of Life. Anyone dropping that quote into conversation today might use it to comment on today's capitalist system and our consumerist lifestyle. But 19th century America was a very different place. Pioneers were expanding west in search of fortunes, often displacing or occupying native tribal lands in the process. The Industrial Revolution was ushering in an era of factories, railroads, and incredible technological innovations like the telegraph and the sewing machine. These were tearing apart legacy social and economic structures. And as for money, when Emerson was writing this, there hadn't been any common standard in his lifetime. Since 1792, the US Mint had been producing dollars and smaller denominations made of gold and silver, but most people were still using foreign coins like the Spanish dollar until it was outlawed in 1857. And every state had their own state banknotes, essentially paper IOUs protected by whatever laws were in place in each state. 1 year after Emerson wrote "Money often costs too much," the Civil War would break out, leading the US government to begin issuing paper money for the first time to fund the war. So, why should you care about all this? Well, money is the one topic we can't escape. Even so, many of us take it for granted. If you're under 50 and you live in the global north, you probably haven't had a good reason to contemplate the true meaning of money in your lifetime. But recently, things have changed. The need to understand money has become unavoidable due to unprecedented government stimulus during the pandemic, inflation at levels not seen in generations, higher interest rates as a result, and recession setting in across many parts of the world. We all use money and have varying opinions about how much things should cost and how much we should get paid and how important money is to all our lives. Yet most of us don't actually understand it. I think once you understand it, you can't help but understand other things which compete with the money we take for granted and maybe even offer some promise for the future. I hope that when you finish listening to this, you'll have a very different relationship with money. You might blame me for it and look back with some skepticism and be questioning it more as a result. But the next time you hear about other forms of money in the future, and recently all the news about Bitcoin that's creeping into the common discourse, you'll remember this. And it'll sound so different, I promise. It'll sound like it might actually be the future. Welcome back to Tech Back Control. This is a project exploring the technology that puts power into the hands of the people. Today, I'm exploring our perception of money and how, if you look at it through 3 different dimensions, it can shape how you think about it and how you consider other things that might be money one day. So I have this theory that people won't understand concepts like Bitcoin until they understand the concept that is money. You don't need to know anything about the technology or cryptography or blockchain. You just need to understand how money, the money we use every day, relies on 3 things. And then I think it will all make sense. And I'm not referring to qualities of money about fungibility or medium of exchange. We use different currencies like dollars, pounds, euros, or yen every day. We often take it for granted that money serves as a unit of account for everything. The income we earn, the food we buy, the clothes we wear, even the roof over our heads. But no one ever truly explains what it is. Where does money come from? Who gives it value? And why is it that we all choose to use it? At least that wasn't taught to me at school. I don't think it's naturally part of the curriculum. And I think when it is, it's treated as this given, this economic law that underpins everything. But it isn't. Really, money comes down to 3 simple things: trust, force, and faith. Let me explain. Trust is the foundation of money. When you're paid in dollars or pounds and when you buy things with that money, you are trusting that the central bank which creates that money, along with the government and the banks who control and transmit it, are honest and honourable. You probably don't realise it, but you trust that they will only issue as much as they say they will, and that they won't defraud you, and that when money appears in your bank account, you can access it, and you can use it whenever and wherever you want to. You also trust that it'll still be there tomorrow. There's many times in history when this trust is broken and the foundation of money falls apart. Capital controls can prevent people accessing their money. Some governments have intentionally devalued their currencies overnight, or made old versions of the currency invalid. And some central banks have lied about how much money they plan to print, or they've suffered from corruption, enriching a few at the centre at the expense of everyone else. So, if trust is the foundation, force is the security. What do I mean by force? Well, you probably don't think about the underlying forces at play when you use money, but there are safeguards that protect your use of money. These include counterfeiting protections in banknotes, the physical security around how they're deemed authentic and how they're made. There's also physical security in bank vaults, and then the cyber security equivalent in banking software and the internet. Additionally, there are unseen forces that regulate how, when, and who can use money. You're lucky because you get to use it, but there are many people who are not allowed to use that money. All taxes must be paid using the money issued by the nation state. This isn't negotiable, and it is enforced. But there's also the protective force, which ensures your money is safe through financial regulations and law enforcement. We often overlook the role of force in money. However, force is essential, and it's always been there. Even in its most primitive form, force ensured that debts can be repaid, and that transactions involving money are secured, whether through the legal system, through state power, or through social and familial pressure, and even through war. So, if trust is the foundation, and force is the security, then what's the third dimension of money? I think it comes down to faith, because faith is confidence in the future. How do you know that your money of today is going to have any value in the future? For Ralph Waldo Emerson, he couldn't. A year after he wrote those famous words, a civil war quickly turned yesterday's gold money into today's paper promises. Whether we're willing to admit it, behind all money, everywhere in the world, it's the belief structure everyone needs for it to hold value, and for people to accept it as a form of payment. Without that faith that in the future it will still be worth something and someone will want it, you wouldn't be willing to accept it as payment in your bank account. The reason that post-pandemic inflation has concerned every level of the political and financial establishment is that it shakes the confidence and faith in money right to the core. So those are the three dimensions. We had trust, which is the foundation. We had force, which is the security, invisible though it may be for many people. And then we had faith, this belief that it's going to have value in the future. So now that you understand those three dimensions, let me explain how these apply to Bitcoin, and you'll probably see it in a different light. Some people say Bitcoin is trustless, that you don't need to trust the government or a central bank or even the person you're transacting with. And this is all true. But you do need to trust in something. You need to trust in mathematics. In simple terms, some very clever mathematics is all you need to trust to use Bitcoin. It can't defraud you or change without you knowing. It can't create more Bitcoin or change the rules when it wants. The trust is enshrined in the mathematics at the core of the Bitcoin protocol. The second dimension is force. Who actually enforces Bitcoin? It doesn't have a police force or a military or much by way of ingrained regulation. You could say that Bitcoin miners do the enforcing. They are the counterfeit and fraud protections. They essentially secure the entire network from bad actors. And that force isn't militarized. It isn't something that can arrest you and put you in jail. The overwhelming force involved in Bitcoin is the thing that it gets bad press for. It's the phenomenal amount of energy used by Bitcoin miners who secure the network. They don't have banks, bank vaults, branches, police forces, auditors, accountants, printing presses, ATMs, a military establishment maintaining the status quo. All of that is just computational energy churning through mathematical calculations to secure the Bitcoin network. Nobody forces you to use it. Nobody's forcing you to pay taxes in it. It's not like dollars, euros, and pounds or yen. It is missing many of the negative forces that we don't see but are present in the money we have. But it uses force, and it uses an overwhelming amount of energy, and that is something that we can't ignore. Finally, like all money, Bitcoin relies on faith. It doesn't get away without it. It only has value when at least one other person thinks it has value. And faith in its future really relies on faith in maths, along with faith that mankind will need some sort of money. You don't need faith in a nation state. You don't need to have faith in the politicians in your government, or that a central bank is going to still be there in the future. Bitcoin has none of those. And if the maths behind Bitcoin gets broken somehow, through some black swan event, then faith in Bitcoin would be shattered. Or who knows, if we evolve into a utopia free from the need for money, then yeah, who needs faith in Bitcoin anyway? So I think if you believe what I'm saying about money, and these three dimensions that are nothing to do with economics, but more to do with practically who we need to trust, who enforces the use of money, and how a shared belief that we all hold true gives something value, then you can believe in the US dollar, the euro, the pound, and you can believe in Bitcoin, and it can all be money for some people. But how does this relate to Tech Back Control and the whole premise of this podcast? Well, the period of Ralph Waldo Emerson's life saw the transformation of the US monetary system. He wrote Money Often Costs Too Much in 1860. In his lifetime, he oversaw the US monetary system go from a fragmented and diverse collection of currencies to a more unified and federally regulated system of the US dollar. That ultimately laid the groundwork for the modern US financial system and eventually the global monetary system that we use today. So the next time you see a story on the news about inflation, recession, corruption, or conflict, or you see a story about Bitcoin and the Bitcoin ETFs that are having success in 2024, just remember this piece and think about those three things. Who do you trust? Are you okay with the amount of force involved in our monetary system? And finally, ask yourself this: do you still have faith in this money in the future? If you're interested in learning more, as usual, I'll share all the links to my research in the show notes. There's a few books that I would recommend whose perspectives I've brought into this topic in their own way. They're not about Bitcoin, but they can give you a more rounded understanding of what money is, and some of their themes have informed me over the years. One of them is Debt, the First 5,000 Years, by the renowned and recently deceased anthropologist David Graeber. Secondly, there's The Paper Money Collapse, which examines the topic through the lens of classical monetary theory and Austrian economics. And finally, Sapiens by Yuval Noah Harari, which delves into the great depth about what makes us human and our shared mythologies and ability to build stories around things like money. If you enjoyed this episode, please leave a review on whatever podcast app you're using. This episode was written, recorded and edited by me. The theme song is by Jonathan Mann, and the backing tracks are all from Epidemic Sounds. Thank you for listening, and I'll catch you next time.